Hello, everybody. This is Funk McLovin. On June, I want to say 20th, I released the Aspect video, and this is a follow-up to the Aspect video that I wanted to make because I'm releasing the class video on January 3rd, which is the same date as the SAHcon Winter Showcase. I want to do a couple follow-ups on the Aspect system because there are some things I didn't cover. There have been some good comments from people. And I wanted to do some housekeeping so that you guys could have a little more information about aspects going into the class video. First of all, I want to talk about a couple of the video's shortcomings. First of all, I didn't go in depth with a definition for each aspect. I just detailed them as they relate to other aspects, and I kind of left out the actual definitions. I did this on purpose, but I realize in retrospect that that was not a very good way to do things. I think that I left out some information which caused some people to misunderstand some things in the comments, and we'll get into that soon. I didn't mention some contributors in the aspect sphere. The person I didn't mention was Argus, Arrghus, who is a collaborator with Optimistic Duelist. I meant to, and I didn't. And I know that I don't owe Argus anything. I just feel bad that I didn't mention that name. I like Argus's work. And I want to be clear on two things. I got some pronouns wrong on some people that I talked about in the last video. First of all, Dewdrop and Aerobarista both go by they, them, and I refer to them both as he, him, and I apologize. You know, there's no hard feelings. I talked to both of them, so this is just my public apology. I apologize to both of you. And I want to be clear on some things that I said in the previous video about Dewdrop. The tone of voice that I used when describing Dewdrop's work was hyperbolic and dismissive. And a lot of people got the notion that I did not like Dewdrop's work or did not like Dewdrop, including Dewdrop themselves, who I apologize to formally. What I wanted to do was to be hyperbolic in order to say two things. One, that I don't entirely agree with Dewdrop's work, and two, that I find Dewdrop's work in some ways exhaustive and thorough in a way that is impressive and kind of funny to me. Dewdrop has essentially written an entire document longer than the Aspect video for basically no recognition. And there are a couple things I disagree with in Dewdrop's video on an intellectual level, but that does not mean that I should have been so dismissive and mean to them. So I apologize formally to you, Dewdrop. I'm going to be talking about Dewdrop more in the class video, so you can look forward to that. Alrighty. This video is going to be about some comments that I got on the previous video on both Reddit and on YouTube. Now, the first one is from a post on Reddit that talks about, it posted my video and people just asked, what do you think of this? It was a discussion thread, and there were a lot of cool comments, so I wanted to talk about them. I'm not going to talk about everyone, but I'm going to talk about someone here. The first comment is by Miserable Following 77. It's on screen. And there's a couple things I want to highlight. It succeeds at a system that doesn't use duality. It fails at being a system that's consistent with Homestuck's writing. There are examples of characters who have relationships that don't fit with the with the relationship between aspects, especially if you include all the ancestors and ancestors. I disagree. It's very textually oriented. In fact, all of my examples were from the text, and I disclaimed when they weren't from the text. There was a lot of extrapolation that needed to be done, and I just wanted to defend that. I think Miserable Following 77's comment is mostly good, and I appreciate that quite a bit. I would like some specific examples of how it didn't fit with the canon system, but the second part of the paragraph of Miserable Following is, my main issue is the idea that a classific system states anything about how you relate to other people at all. A classific is descriptive of you, prescribed to fit in the actions of what you'll do in a game session, not proscripted, given to you before you existed and thus must act within it. I get this comment a lot, and one of the shortcomings of classifics is this kind of what they call proscripted. The idea that you are someone and you fit into this mold. And that's kind of an open question in the Aspect video. So I'm not sure. I think it was on me that I didn't communicate enough that I think that an aspect is not necessarily something that is proscripted. It is something that you act as or act out or role play as, and I'm going to get more into that into the class video. What I mean is, okay, Dave is a time player, so he has certain feelings about X, Y, and Z. He does not feel those things because he is a time player. He is a time player because he feels those things. He would be a different character if he did not. It does not control his actions. He controls his aspect. I hope that makes sense. Cause and effect in Homestuck is kind of fucky, so I don't really know, what people think of that. Someone responded to Miserable Following 77 named Revlar, and Revlar said, I think calling it descriptive is wishful thinking. Predetermination exists in Homestuck. Why should we rule out the idea that the infinity mechanism is assigning you a role that you're forced to play by predestination? Just because we like free will better? I kind of agree with this. I think that predestination does exist in Homestuck and in our real lives to some extent. But, I don't know. I think there's more nuance there than saying predetermination exists. People still have free will in Homestuck. It's just that free will doesn't matter in terms of the alpha timeline. You have to do predetermined actions, otherwise you die. So, I like Revlar is closer to what I think, but that's what I have to say about that. I wanted to clear that up first. Our second comment is from Haunted Hoodie. I don't like the way he described mind's relations with other aspects. It comes off as mere tolerance, even for the major chord, and holier-than-thou attitude for all the others. To me, it feels like they put the least thought here and just went with hyper-rational Einstein. I don't know. This is kind of related to the first comment, but I think that mind players are drawn to mind things. So the idea that they're a hyper-rational Einstein, I think is that seems reasonable to me. That seems like a reasonable claim, that they see themselves as that. I don't think every mind player is necessarily smart, but it kind of comes with the territory, mind. A lot of people had specific comments like this, and I just want to say, I had my research, I have my way of justifying things, and if you have your way of justifying things, that's fine. But I stand by what I said. The next comment is from Mistel1270. I do think there's merit to the idea that each class aspect relates to each other aspect in a particular way. I'm not confident that this would reflect on how individuals with certain aspects relate to each other. Additionally, there doesn't seem to be a particular rhyme to how the harmonies relate to each other. One aspect's minor fifth can be affectionate positive, while another's can be antagonistic. It's definitely a cool take on it. So I'm frustrated with this comment because that's the point. In music, a minor fifth, they said minor fifth, that's not a real interval, but a perfect fifth is different in different types of chords, in different kinds of contexts. In a major chord, a perfect fifth sounds very nice, pleasant, stationary, but in a fifth chord, it sounds very dissonant and it wants to resolve to something else. This is why it's a vibes-based system, folks. Different intervals have different emotions attached to them. There is no necessary rhyme or reason, but there is a similarity that goes beyond simple linguistics. For instance, tritone is a very dissonant interval, but when a tritone is in a major seventh dominant chord, it sounds very pleasant. So the idea that they should be consistent is something that I never implied, and in fact, that's kind of the point. Astral Drim says, I totally dig using music to define the relation between aspect, considering the concept of the fray motif for combined attacks, but I would nitpick since the characters and class aspects haven't been created in a single go. It's a bit hard to think the writers of Homestuck had plans to set relations in this precise between every characters. Yes. I don't think Hussey set it up this way. I'm just doing analysis. This is kind of a death of the author analysis. I don't think Hussey intended this. I don't think he had this idea. I'm not decoding this idea from anything. I'm coming up with this idea freshly. I'm developing it. And that's the point. I don't, this comment, I respect it. I get it. But this is not what I'm trying to do. Next, I want to talk about some responses I got on YouTube. Jam6_514 says some things about very specific aspects. I don't know why I saved this one. I covered this earlier in the one that was saying things about how mind was very specific. They just had some personal qualms with specific aspects. Again, this is my analysis. If you want to do your analysis, that's fine and dandy. What I am doing is responding to other analysis I've seen, and if you want to respond to analysis of mine, I would encourage that. Average Neko Arc Enjoyer says, good taste by the way, I don't really believe in the theory that the different aspects correspond to different personality behavioral traits, but it's neat seeing people who have other opinions on the matter. I want to build on this from the other comment from the Reddit thread. I don't really get this critique, because if different aspects correspond to different personality behavioral traits, what are we doing? What is the point? If we're not identifying psychological phenomena, if we're not identifying patterns in behavior, if we're not identifying something in the mind, then all we're doing is talking about basically superpowers. I think this has to do more with class and how it actually affects your personality and disposition. If you're building a psychological framework like Classpect, if you're building this sort of hyperflexible mythology, as Hussey says, you have to include some kind of personality or behavioral traits. You have to do that, right? Slytherin House would not be Slytherin House without it having definitions of people who enter it. It's the slithery evil camp. People love putting themselves in these groups, these hyperflexible systems, because of that reason. You have to have some kind of personality behavioral trait. If you don't, you're just talking about superheroes. And that's fine. You can talk about superheroes and the different superpowers that a time player might have, but that's not the point of this video. And you can just get that from the comic. Like, you don't really need to do analysis on that. We can all see what kind of powers they have. Official Soul Knight 6321 says, the world is built of things, but the only true things are quarks. The only objective relationships are distances and energy. Everything else, every definition, is subjective. In a way, then, the subjective, the mental world, is built from relationships between relationships. I included this one not because it was a critique, but because this is essentially my hypothesis with Classpects. And it only got 3 likes. That's crazy. This is like a really insightful comment. I think it's stated very clearly and concisely, and you know, if I was smarter, I could put it that concisely, but I had to make a fucking hour-and-a-half long video about it. Next comment from Alamon Yo-Yo 69420. Oh, it's the numbers. Oh, dualism and the dichotomies of aspects are very much a guilty pleasure. It definitely presents the aspects in an easier to understand medium, doesn't it? I want to talk about this comment because most of the people, when I made the video, I thought I was going to get more pushback about the dualism thing. Like, people liked dualism. They seem to. And even people I talked to in the video and later, like Arobarista, who I connected with briefly, liked the graduation past dualism, which is very interesting. I didn't realize that. This is the only comment, really, that kind of defended dualism. And the argument is, it presents the aspects in an easier to understand medium. And I agree. But we can go further, and I wanted to, so I did. That burp hurt. I got acid reflux. So Dane1382 says, this is an interesting video on 1/3. I'm not going to read this whole thing. It's a long comment. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Now, as a first thought, I feel as though you might have gone out of order with your videos. I'm of the opinion that aspect, at least on a character level, doesn't hold much meaning outside of the character's class. I want to address this because this is a sentiment that I got quite a bit. I think aspect and class, you can't really say one comes before the other. They're doing very different things. Aspects I covered first because I think they are fundamental to Homestuck's universe and indeed our own subjective universe. And I think they're more direct than class. I think class has more to do with like psychology and archetypes, whereas aspects are a more broad, sort of almost alchemical notion. So I just went out of order. I didn't, I don't think it should be in order. I think you can watch the aspect or class video first. It doesn't matter. Then in the last paragraph, they say, while I agree that the geometric aspect wheel is reductive, I don't entirely agree with your vibes theory. It comes down to comparing aspects to each other in a vacuum, and as I've said earlier, I don't think thinking about aspects without considering how classes shape them is productive at all. Now, what they're critiquing here is the way I've analyzed the aspects, right? They're saying, okay, we've, in Homestuck, only seen 2 to 3 examples of each aspect, right? Some aspects like mind only have Terezi and her Dancestor. Some aspects like time have Caliborn, Dave, Damara, and Aradia, but that's still only 4 examples. So how can we identify anything about these aspects if we're seeing them through the guise of these characters? And to that I say, well, this being the only canonical work in Homestuck itself, and arguably Homestuck 2, though that is, again, dubiously canon. I don't really want to get into the fucking canon debate, but let's say for sake of argument, Homestuck is the only canon work. This is the only interpretation we can have. And the vision of time that I've included in my aspect video, in my opinion, is open to having other ideas inserted into it. I say in the video that each aspect is like a pool that you can't see the bottom of, and this is reflected in how I've discussed them. I think they're very open-ended. I think this person is trying to put me in a box and say that I'm saying something I'm not, but that's kind of on me for not explaining what I mean. As for explaining them in a vacuum, I don't know if I do that, really. I explain them in relation to other characters, and then I use kind of textual examples to back those up. So I don't think I am explaining them in a vacuum. I'm explaining them through the lens of what we have seen in Homestuck. And as for okay, well, what did they look like without Homestuck? Well, they don't exist. They don't exist without Homestuck. So this is all we have to go on. I feel very confident in extrapolating information from this base work, because it's very long and there's a lot to it. That was kind of a roundabout way to explain what I mean, so I hope you understand. The next thing is from Patch Fitch 6660. You made a pretty severe error in the time hope section. Time players seem to frequently fixate on hope. Caliborn is obsessed with Jake, and Dave has unquestioned adoration for Barack Obama, as shown in the epilogues. Again, this is analytical stuff. This is beyond the scope of what I wanted to do. You're talking about actual themes in the story. I'm talking about, aspects as they are. Again, I don't disagree with this, to be clear. I think that time players do fixate on hope, because hope as a function of time seems like it makes sense. And that's kind of a interesting observation. So yeah, you have the tone of disagreeing with me, but I don't disagree with you. Pat Fitch 6660. I think this is the last comment, number 12. Great video. I haven't finished it at the time of writing, but I thought I'd get some thoughts out. The redacted section has some issues. For starters, how the aspects view the others feels narrow. It's hard to say for certain what several feel about Doom because they don't talk about a Doom player at any point. You can't say Breath doesn't care about Doom when we've never seen a Breath player talk to a Doom player. I think this critique is good because it underlines the shortcomings of the analysis that I've done, in that not everyone has a canonical interaction, and I did have to extrapolate a lot of them. But that's I never claim not to, so I don't really feel like it was an oversight on my part. I tried to disclaim where I could, where I didn't have much to go on from these two. I used my brain to think of what they might be, and that was not an undertaking that was light. I had a lot of peer review on this section. In fact, I had a document that was just about peer review to the section where I listed all the relationships between aspects. Then the Then the third paragraph, the way the funk narrates the section infuriates me. They say, here we go. I don't care if you think that the narration irritated you. I'm sorry. There's a written version. That's your thing. But they say, circling back to the one point, however, there's some limited choices. Rage suffers because he narrates it like he's Batman, and it distracts from the actual words being said. I focused on how negative everything sounded that I can't even remember if there are any good views on it because it's negative. I think positive and negative is totally incompatible with vibes theory. Positive and negative don't really enter into vibes theory because positive and negative never enter into like music theory. There's no good or bad chord on its own, and there's no good or bad aspect on their own, and there's no good or bad like interaction between them. There's tension between them, and I tried to underline that, like, just off the top of my head, maybe a Hope player and a Doom player wouldn't get along because they're like diametrically opposed, but that doesn't mean they would be enemies, and that doesn't mean that they necessarily would have certain feelings about each other. And then in their last sentence, they say that it's too focused on what Homestuck gives us. I don't understand what that means because aspects they come from Homestuck. I don't know what you mean. Most of the comments that were critical or had questions had some kind of bent about like you're being too limiting, which I actually like as a critique, because if I'm limiting, that is exactly what I'm trying to stop. I'm trying to get away from dualism. I'm trying to get away from being a limiting framework, and I'm trying to advance the discussion. So actually, if you think I've been limiting, that's, to me, a good critique because I need to remove those limitations. However, I stand by everything I said in the video. I just wanted to clarify because I think it's good to engage with people who have comments of this nature. There were a lot of kind comments, a lot of nice comments. I didn't include those because while it is very kind and very nice to hear that you like my work, and I do appreciate those, and I read every comment, I find it more useful to actually respond to the people who are, critiquing in good faith or have questions in good faith. So if you left a nice comment, I did see it, and I love you. That's all I have for this video. Again, the class video is going to be out on January 3rd. That's so fucking close. I got to get my ass to work. Jesus Christ, that's so close. Oh no. Merry Christmas. I'm recording this on Christmas, but it's probably like the 27th by now, so goodbye.